The words landed like ice water down my spine. "There's no place for you here." My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, stood in the doorway of what used to be my son's childhood home, her arms crossed, her smile thin and sharp as a blade. Behind her, the Christmas tree glowed warm and golden, and I could hear my grandchildren laughing somewhere deep inside the house, but I wasn't invited in. Not anymore. Let me go back a little. My name is Margaret, and I'm 62 years old. I raised my son David on my own after my husband passed when David was only 7. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked 2 jobs for years, one at a local diner, the other cleaning offices at night, so David could have a good life, a good education, a good start. He grew up to be everything I'd hoped for. Kind, hardworking, loyal. He went to college on a scholarship, became an engineer, and eventually met Rebecca at a company event. She was beautiful, polished, confident, the kind of woman who always seemed to know exactly what she wanted. They got married 5 years ago, and I was happy for him, truly. I liked Rebecca at first. She was charming, quick-witted, and she made David smile. But over time, I started to notice little things. The way she'd correct him in front of others. The way she'd roll her eyes when I offered to help with the grandkids. The way she always had an opinion about how I dressed, how I spoke, how I should act around her friends. Still, I told myself it was just her personality. Some people are particular. I didn't want to be the kind of mother-in-law who caused problems. David and Rebecca had 2 children, Emma, who was 8, and Jacob, who was 5. I adored them. I babysat whenever they needed me, showed up to every recital and soccer game, knitted them sweaters every winter. I thought I was doing what grandmothers do. I thought I was wanted. 2 years ago, I made a decision that I thought was generous. David and Rebecca were looking to buy a bigger house, something with a yard and good schools nearby. They were stretched thin financially. Rebecca had expensive tastes, and David was doing his best to keep up. So I offered to help. I sold the small house I'd lived in for 30 years and gave them a significant portion of the money as a down payment. It wasn't everything I had, but it was close. "Mom, are you sure?" David had asked, his eyes worried. "I'm sure," I told him. "Family helps family." Rebecca had hugged me that day and called me generous. I felt needed, valued. I moved into a modest apartment nearby, thinking I'd be close enough to see the grandkids whenever I wanted. For a while, things seemed fine. I visited often, I helped with school pickups, I brought groceries when I knew they were busy. But gradually, over the past year, I started to feel a shift. Rebecca's texts became shorter. My invitations to dinner were often met with excuses. When I did come over, she seemed distracted, irritated, like I was in the way. David noticed, I think, but he never said anything. He was caught in the middle, and I didn't want to make it harder for him. Then came this Christmas. I'd assumed I'd spend Christmas Day with them, the way I had every year since the grandkids were born. I'd even bought gifts weeks in advance. A drone for Jacob, art supplies for Emma, and a cashmere scarf for Rebecca that I really couldn't afford, but bought anyway because I wanted her to feel appreciated. 2 days before Christmas, I texted David to confirm what time I should arrive. His response came hours later. "Mom, Rebecca thinks it's better if it's just us this year. You understand, right?" I stared at the message for a long time. No explanation, no apology, just an assumption that I would understand. I didn't. I called him. "David, sweetheart, did I do something wrong?" "No, Mom, it's just Rebecca wants a quieter holiday, just the 4 of us." "But I'm family too," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay calm. There was a long pause. I know, but she's really stressed right now. Can we do something next week instead? I agreed because I didn't know what else to do. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my apartment, wrapping gifts I didn't know when I'd give. I watched old movies and tried not to cry. But on Christmas morning, something in me shifted. I couldn't just sit there. I decided to stop by, just for a few minutes, just to drop off the presents and see the kids' faces. I drove to their house, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw cars I didn't recognize. Laughter spilled out through the windows. They were having a party. I walked up to the door and knocked. Rebecca answered. She looked stunning in a red dress, a glass of wine in her hand. Behind her, I could see people I'd never met. Her friends, her parents, her sister. My grandchildren were running around, happy and loud. "Margaret," she said, her voice flat, "what are you doing here?" "I just wanted to drop off the gifts," I said, holding up the bag. "For the kids." She didn't move to let me in. "There's no place for you here," she said quietly, glancing back over her shoulder. "This is a family gathering. I thought David made that clear." I felt my face flush hot. "I am family." "You know what I mean." Her smile was thin, cold. "It's just complicated. Maybe next time." And then she closed the door. I stood there for a moment, the bag still in my hands, my breath fogging in the cold December air. Inside, I could hear Emma calling for her mom, and someone laughed, a bright, careless sound. I got back in my car and left. The days after Christmas were some of the loneliest of my life. David texted me a few days later apologizing, saying Rebecca had been overwhelmed and that it wasn't personal. He promised we'd get together soon, but soon never came. I replayed that moment at the door over and over. "There's no place for you here." The words haunted me. I started to wonder if I'd been fooling myself all along. Maybe I'd never been truly welcome. Maybe I'd been tolerated, not loved. I tried to distract myself. I picked up extra shifts at the diner. I called old friends. I volunteered at a local food bank. But every time I passed a family with kids, every time I saw a grandmother holding a grandchild's hand, the ache came back. Then, in mid-January, I got a text from Rebecca. "Margaret, we need to talk. Can you come by tomorrow?" My stomach twisted. I texted back, "Of course, what time?" 2 p.m. Come alone. The next afternoon, I drove to their house. This time, Rebecca let me in. The house was quiet. The kids were at school. David was at work. She led me into the living room and gestured for me to sit. She didn't offer tea or coffee. She just sat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Margaret," she began, "I want to be honest with you." I nodded, my heart pounding. "David and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you take a step back from our lives." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You're around too much," she said simply. "The kids are getting confused about boundaries, and honestly, I feel like you undermine me as a mother." "I would never." "You do," she interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "You bring them treats when I've told them no sweets. You let them stay up late when you babysit. You buy them things I've explicitly said they don't need." "I'm their grandmother," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just trying to love them." "I know, but your version of love is too much. It's overwhelming." David agrees. "David said that?" She nodded. "He just doesn't want to hurt your feelings." I felt something crack inside me. "What are you asking me to do?" "Just give us space, a few months maybe, longer. We'll reach out when we're ready." I left that house feeling like I'd been erased. Over the following weeks, I heard nothing from David. My calls went to voicemail. My texts were answered with 1 or 2 words. if at all. I sent cards to the kids. They were never acknowledged. I started to notice other things, too. When I drove past their house, I'd see Rebecca's parents' car in the driveway. I'd see her sister dropping by with groceries. I realized I wasn't being asked to give space to everyone, just to me. I was being replaced. One evening in late February, I was looking through old photo albums, trying to remember a time when I felt wanted, when I found a folder of documents I'd tucked away years ago, copies of the paperwork from when I helped David and Rebecca with the house. I'd never asked for the money back. It was a gift. But as I read through the documents, I noticed something I'd forgotten. The down payment I gave them, $80,000, had been documented as a loan, not a gift. David had insisted on it at the time, saying it made him feel better, like he wasn't just taking from me. I'd signed the paperwork without thinking much of it. It was just a formality between family. But now, looking at it again, I realized something. If it was legally a loan, that meant it was still owed. I wasn't sure what to do with that information. Part of me didn't want to think about it at all. But another part of me, the part that had been told there was no place for me, started to wonder if maybe I'd been too generous, too trusting, too eager to give without asking what I'd get in return. In early March, I got a call from an old friend, Linda, who still lived in my old neighborhood. We met for coffee, and she mentioned she'd run into Rebecca at the grocery store. She was talking about their new kitchen renovation, Linda said, stirring sugar into her tea. Marble countertops, custom cabinets, the works. Must have cost a fortune. I felt my stomach drop. A renovation? Yeah, she said they'd been planning it for months. Sounded really excited. I drove home in a daze. A renovation? Months of planning? Expensive materials? Meanwhile, I was being told to stay away, that I was too much, that I needed to give them space. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I looked up their social media accounts, something I rarely did. Rebecca's Instagram was full of photos. New furniture, new curtains, a photo of the kids in front of a freshly painted playroom, and one photo, dated 2 weeks ago, of her and David holding champagne glasses in front of a sparkling new kitchen island. The caption read, "Dreams do come true when you work hard and invest in what matters. #blessed, #home goals." I stared at that word, invest. I thought about my $80,000. I thought about my 30 years in that little house, sold so they could have their dream. And I thought about being shut out on Christmas. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Ellen, and she'd been recommended by a coworker. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense. I brought the loan documents with me. She read them carefully, then looked up at me. "This is pretty straightforward. It's a documented loan. Did you ever discuss repayment terms?" "No," I admitted. "It was just supposed to be between family." "That's fine. Without specified terms, the law assumes it's payable on demand. You have the right to request repayment." "I don't want to hurt my son," I said quietly. "Then don't think of it that way," Ellen said. "Think of it as protecting yourself. You gave them a significant amount of money. You're entitled to it back, especially if they're financially stable enough to fund major renovations." She helped me draft a formal letter requesting repayment. It was polite, clear, and legally sound. It gave them 30 days to respond. I sent it certified mail. For a week, I heard nothing. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, what the hell is this?" His voice was tight, angry in a way I'd never heard before. "It's a repayment request," I said calmly, "for the loan I gave you." "Loan? That was a gift." "Actually, you insisted we document it as a loan. I have the paperwork." Silence. Mom, we can't pay you back right now. We just put everything into the house. I know, I saw the photos. Another silence, longer this time. Rebecca is furious, he finally said. She thinks you're trying to sabotage us. I'm not sabotaging anyone, David. I'm asking for what's legally mine. If you can afford a $40,000 renovation, you can work out a repayment plan. This is insane, his voice cracked. You're going to destroy our family over money? I didn't destroy anything, I said, my voice steady. I was told there was no place for me. I was pushed out. I'm just making sure I'm not left with nothing. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, my hands trembling. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad, but I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I mattered. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Ellen. They've agreed to a repayment plan, she said. Monthly installments over 5 years, with interest. They agreed? They didn't have much choice. The documentation is airtight. That weekend, David came to my apartment, alone. He looked exhausted. He sat across from me at my small kitchen table, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. I didn't know, he finally said, about Christmas. I mean, I knew Rebecca didn't want you there, but I didn't realize she'd say what she said. She told me there was no place for me. He closed his eyes. I know, she told me, and I should have stood up for you. I should have fought harder. Why didn't you? Because I was scared, he said quietly. Scared of making her angry, scared of rocking the boat, scared of losing my family. I'm your family too, David. I know. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Mom. We sat there, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. The loan, he said eventually, we'll pay it back, every cent. It'll be tight, but we'll manage. I don't want to ruin you, I said. I just needed you to see that I'm not invisible. I'm not disposable. You're not, he said, tears in his eyes. You never were. He reached across the table and took my hand. Can we start over? He asked. I looked at my son, my boy, grown into a man I was still so proud of, and I nodded. We can try. It's been 6 months since that conversation. David and I meet for coffee every other week, just the two of us. He's started setting boundaries with Rebecca. Small ones, but they're there. I've seen the kids a handful of times, and while it's not what it used to be, it's something. Rebecca and I are civil. We'll never be close, and I've accepted that. But she no longer dismisses me, and I no longer bend over backward to please her. I've learned something important through all of this. Love isn't supposed to erase you. Generosity isn't supposed to make you small. And family, real family, doesn't shut the door in your face and expect you to be grateful for the chance to knock again. I gave what I could, and I stood up when it mattered. That's enough. Sometimes the place you're looking for isn't at someone else's table. It's in your own dignity, your own worth, your own refusal to disappear.
If you've ever felt unseen or unappreciated, you're not alone. Drop a comment and share your story. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this real-life emotional story, please consider liking and subscribing for more calm, thoughtful reflections on family, boundaries, and finding your voice.